Hey, and welcome everybody to another edition of the GCNC Worldview. For those of you who have been with us for a while, you know that we've gone through some name changes and some adaptations of the show this year. A lot of that has been due to some great new sponsors and some great new partners. So want to make sure I thank Lyft for sponsoring the GCNC Worldview. They've got a show coming up in Vancouver in January, which for those of you who will be there, please reach out to me. I'm making the assumption everybody knows, but maybe you don't. My name's Chris Day. I'm the co-founder of the Global Cannabis Network Collective. And with me is one of those partners that I just mentioned, Dave Barton from Thermidor. Dave, thanks for calling in, and I guess your time slot it's good afternoon. So thanks for joining.
It is. No, thank you. Thanks for having us. I mean, we've spoken to you a few times. It's kind of interesting to be on the other side of things, but no, absolutely. Thanks for having me today, sir, and always good to see you. And I'm calling in from, I guess, a chilly, grey British afternoon in December, and it's not quite seasonal kind of fun times yet, but it certainly feels like that's on the way. So again, this is sort of the run up to the end of the year, and all is good, I think. But you're in sunny Mexico, so I'm very jealous right now. But
yeah, this is actually the first series of podcast episodes that we've recorded from what I'm fondly calling GCNC Southern Command in Mexico.
Cool.
We, it's funny because last year, of course, all the talk was about whether or not Mexico was going to legalize and how quickly that was going to move in the cannabis space, and we're still waiting. So hopefully moving down here, just, I can help continue to encourage that. And then you're just across a channel and a couple of train rides from this year's Talk of the Town, which has been Germany, and all of the movements in Europe. So, hopefully between the two of us, we can just help push all of these continental shifts a little bit.
It would be good, wouldn't it? It would be marvelous to think that, in some way we can have some sort of impact. But again, right now it's just kind of looking, watching and waiting and saying, okay, you can see, I mean, it's interesting to see that there has been such traction. And I think, what do I think about Germany? I mean, Germany is an interesting one. I mean, when we were there in Berlin back in the summer, and the kind of announcement was basically made that, Germany's going to go full recreational legalization in the next couple of years. It was a kind of, okay, that's really cool. And then it was a case of, oh, really, it seems like there's going to be a whole industry, built from the ground up. And I think what is clear, and again, this is just sort of my own thoughts on it, is that, it's going to be pretty robust. They're going to do it properly in Germany. They're going to sort of, and I think that's kind of reflected in the kind of attitudes towards, the legislation that's kind of being put in place. As you saw, there was that kind of leak, the data leak, where they sort of said, oh, yeah, we were thinking about doing this. And then there was a bit of a backlash. And it's like, okay, right, we've got that. Oh, by the way, we've changed our minds around that the following week when the official announcement's made. But, again, it shows that they're listening to people, and, they're listening to the industry, and they're listening to what, customers want too. So, I mean, it's all very encouraging, I think.
I think so. I mean, it's obviously going to be a pragmatic process over there. And oftentimes, I think historically we've seen the opposite, which is just push something out there, see what happens, and we'll try and fix it on the back end. And somewhere in
but I think that creates momentum. But absolutely, I think that creates momentum. I mean, this is something we've sort of thinking about, the idea that, in the US, obviously there's sort of, I mean, Colorado's, has been, was it rec for 10 years, and everyone says, oh, maybe we've been building the plane as we're flying it and things like that, but at the same time it's happening. Do you know what I mean? Rightly or wrongly, this is the right decision, I don't know, let's try it and see. And I think
Yeah.
personally, I like that approach. It kind of makes a bit more sense. You know, you want to get the omelet, but you need to perfect the recipe. But unless you break the eggs, you're not going to get there, right? And, you know, I think you can over-engineer something and then think about it, get consensus. And it's like anything, you know, consensus is the enemy of progress in some respects. Occasionally, most of the time. But again, it's, you know, until it's not a thing till it's a thing, you know?
Yep. Yeah, you know, I should have mentioned in the intro, you alluded to it, that you spend a lot of time on the other side of the microphone doing podcast interviews with Lobster Pod. I've had the pleasure of being on there a couple of times. And, you know, as we're winding up the year, so by the time people hear this, we'll probably be, you know, in January 2023. As you talk to people, what have you found those areas that have created the most energy and momentum versus those that seem to cause the most trepidation in the last year?
You mean in terms of just what people's thoughts are on different markets and, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how they're processing, you know, their business decisions.
I think, I mean, from some of the sort of shows, you know, in Europe, so like, you know, ICBC and Cannabis Europa, there seems to be a lot of interest from, you know, your side of the pond, from the US, from the Canada, in what's going to happen in Europe. And everyone's kind of poised to sort of like, is there opportunity here? Is this going to happen? And, you know, I think that seems to be a bit of a waiting game. And everyone wants to kind of make the right move when it's the right time, or come in and have an early kind of mover advantage. And that seems to be the sort of attitude, I think, from a lot of companies maybe based in North America. And again, this is based on my own perceptions. And I think that, you know, I mean, for us as Thermidor, when we're looking for, you know, kind of new business stuff, we're kind of looking across the pond. That's kind of why we were at MJ BizCon, as you know, and because I guess the market's the most mature for marketing, if you like. So there's opportunity to kind of do that already. And in the US and Canada in particular, it's not quite the case here in Europe, really, because, you know, everyone's still trying to figure out what it means to have a legal market in whether it's medical or recreational. And that seems to be, you know, when we talk about sort of building brands, that doesn't necessarily seem to be what the emphasis is on, at least over here. That's kind of my perception. But again, similarly, when I talk to people in sort of Latin America and Colombia in particular, and talking about the challenges they face and kind of trying to bring product into the US and Canada and over to Europe as well. And you know, it's interesting that it always seems like there's similar challenges from different countries, but they seem to manifest in different ways. And I think by having conversations and discussions, you know, like with the GCNC, people are sort of comparing notes all the time. And I think that's the only way to kind of figure stuff out from a business problem perspective. What are you guys doing? Oh, you having that issue there? Right, that's kind of similar to what we were doing 2 years ago. And we've managed to change it this way. Okay, cool. You know what I mean? There's a kind of foresight, and there's a bit of to and froing and trying to figure out what's coming next. And I think that's kind of how it seems to be shaking out. So,
yeah, you know, you mentioned Colombia. I was on a call this week with some folks who are actively working on the lobbying efforts for shifting adult use into adult use markets in Colombia. And they're now through the fourth constitutional debate out of 8 that they have to go through. And I mean, the good news there was that it survived. This whole motion survived through the fourth, which, according to folks that would know better than I, that was the first time that had happened. So there's hope. And I think in general, when I was in Germany, as you mentioned, and in the UK for this past summer, I think the energy and momentum was there because there are possibilities and there are discussions. Whereas in North America, the reason people are so interested in Europe is because we've had the same stagnant conversations now for years. And while states continue to come on, the feds continue to not do much other than talk. So we'll just have to see how that goes. I think in 2023, the first 6 months will likely be indicative of whether or not we're going to see anything at all for the next 2 years in North America. And similarly, we'll just have to see what happens in Colombia, Germany, and France as well, with their pilot project and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always intrigued by Thailand as well. I mean, looking further east and thinking about kind of Asian markets opening up a bit more and thinking what's the opportunity there. But again, it seems, I mean, I don't quite know the full inside story on what's happening in Thailand, but it seems to be there is, culturally, there's the kind of acceptance, and legally there's a certain tolerance, but almost officially there's another kind of attitude again, and it's that kind of misalignment of all of those things, which seems to be, okay, we can do this but we can't do that, or do that as long as that person hasn't got, doesn't know or isn't do you know what I mean? So again, yeah. I think having those kind of certainties in place, I don't know, is it conducive or or does it work against progress? I think it comes in both in equal measure. I mean, obviously you have a broader perspective on these sorts of things, but what's your take on that? Actually,
I think the challenges encourage, while in the whole it may feel like it's blocking it, I think it encourages a certain type of entrepreneurial mindset to overcome, right?
Yeah.
The people that have been pushing this forward see that as just one more wall to climb and one more thing to figure out. And so in that sense, I think any positive talk about emerging markets will provide enough energy and juice to keep it going. Since you mentioned Thailand, and of course there's been discussions in Asia, in Japan, and India has continued to grow domestically in some pretty big ways. Since we're working together on these podcasts this year, I think you and I need to figure out how to build a series that is specifically focused on the emerging Asian markets, because there is a lot of talk about it. And I think it's going to continue to be a big point of conversation in 2023, how that part of the world evolves. But it is that, especially in Europe and North America, I think a lot of talk, not a lot of great understanding on what is actually happening. So that may need to be a joint effort project.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it would be really interesting to speak to some folks out there. And again, we've had a couple of conversations with a few people. Actually, I had a guy sort of, we know, sort of like, when are you guys coming to Thailand? I'm like, well, when you're paying, kind of. but it's kind of like, it is so interesting. And I think he was sending me some pictures of kind of like consumption lounges there, which aren't officially sort of sanctioned, but they're, from the looks of things, the setup is pretty sweet and it looks pretty slick. I mean, perhaps more so than some of the places I've been in Europe. And it looks like, wow, okay, so people are, there's real opportunity here. There's in these emerging markets, it's a case of like, what is, how do you navigate that? And I think that seems to be the biggest thing. It's like, well, is it about having an appetite for risk, or is it about mitigating the risk? Is it about just understanding or having a connection on the ground? All of those things probably, but it's, again, having that joined up approach and local knowledge. And I think that's where and there's nothing like sort of, being somewhere, speaking to people and seeing how something operates on the ground in order to really get that feel for it. And
I need to reach out to Boris Beagle, is a friend of the GCNC. He produces the NOCO Hemp Expo in Colorado. And in Thailand, we're getting ready to participate in his show. I'll be speaking there in the spring, and I think it'll be a good opportunity to maybe bring Morris on and entice him to talk about how the hemp market is evolving in Asia as well, and get some line of sight into those conversations. We can do that here in the next couple of weeks and let people know how that's going.
For sure.
There's some common background that you and I have. I spent a lot of years running ad agencies and creative shops, and you mentioned brand development and marketing, and you might maybe tell the audience a little bit about Thermidor.
But
so people can know. And my question that'll riff off of that is, you know, in spite of the fact that, yeah, traditional brand development, as people think about it in advertising, may not really be completely fruitful in a lot of these, but that B2B marketing and communication that happens upstream from the consumer branding seems to be incredibly important right now. You know, what's your thoughts on the marketing, branding, and development of the space? And like I said, what's Thermidor up to?
Well, again, you know, so much to say on that. So for me, I've always kind of worked in B2B marketing, and, you know, I never really thought that was like a thing until, you know, you kind of end up doing it. And it's always been very much a case of, well, Thermidor, in a sense, well, what we're doing, we are a content-led creative agency. So again, we are sort of, me personally, sort of schooled in the kind of dry rigors of B2B sort of PR and sort of marketing and things like that. I think I've, over the last, well, more years than I care to remember, probably like 17 or 18, sort of works in, you know, everything from kind of in construction equipment to, you know, energy efficient lighting to car paint to, you know, really sort of sexy stuff like food service. And it's kind of like, okay, what do they all have in common? Well, we're kind of selling between businesses. And it always felt like to me, you know, when you talk business to business, somehow all that kind of conversation, that kind of, you know, personality gets sort of drained out of something, and we all put on these kind of gray suits and ties. And again, that really doesn't wash in the cannabis world at all.
It does not.
So it's really a case of, you know, what I see is like, you know, this is, you know, for all the good that cannabis is doing in the world, this is a fun industry to be a part of, whether you're, you know, selling kind of agricultural equipment or, you know, doing something more, you know, you creating a new kind of consumer brand, or, you know, there's so much opportunity for kind of creativity and engagement, and just to have some fun. And that's kind of the message that I guess we're trying to put out there as Thermidor. You know, that's the sort of thing we're doing for clients. And we started out just by kind of creating the content that we want to see, you know, so hence the podcast, hence, you know, coming up with these kind of weird campaigns that we're sort of putting out there as well. And I think it's just, you know, like, for example, we've done this kind of advent calendar that we've put on like on social media, using those lovely cards which we handed out to you and others at I
was going to ask about those.
About the cards, yeah.
The idea cards, yeah.
The idea, and, you know, I mean, ideas are a dime a dozen, but, you know, what happens is, you know, it's all in the execution. Let's bring these things, let's feed people the ideas, let's figure out a way to kind of, it might be, we take it, you know, the cards are the ideas, they're taken to the nth degree, you know, they need to be brought in line with something. But again, it's that freedom of thought that, you know, can be channeled into something that is traditionally, you know, B2B. But again, B2B is not boring to bullshit. You know, it's business to business, it's people to people, it's, you know, it's all those kind of things that everyone says a million times over. But again, we can still have fun with it, we can still create good content, we can still have a powerful, engaging tone of voice as a cannabis business. Well, any cannabis business can, you know, and I think that's something I'm keen to sort of perpetuate among, you know, new and, you know, prospective clients. Let's find a way to make this the fun that, you know, and interesting and engaging as the plant is, as the whole industry is, because, you know, it's still a young industry. I know someone like yourself who's been in it for quite a while, considered sort of OG, but you know, it's only been 10 years, right?
That's right. Yeah. You know, I have to remind people that while, you know, governments started to redefine legality about 10 to 12 years ago, the truth is this industry never went away, right? So the true OGs have been doing B2B marketing in different fashions for decades, and generations. So, and it's important that we always acknowledge that. And I think on the marketing side, your point about B2B not having to be boring, not having to be sort of just so drab. I often remind people that in those supply chain type discussions, you're still selling humans, right? Like, you can say it's business to business, but it is still, as you mentioned, people to people, making business decisions. And that can be done in an exceedingly dull way, or it can be done in a way that still shows the responsibility, the sustainability, the profitability, and the intriguing and interesting and super influential for the future kind of industry that we're all trying to build together. So those cards, for folks who don't know too much about the idea cards, I've got to do a positive plug for that, Dave, because what you and Jamie came up with in Vegas was these idea cards that are totally, well, oftentimes feel completely random.
Yeah.
And they're hilarious, but they get people thinking outside the box and in unpredictable ways, which is frankly what brands need in this industry more than anything. I've sat on so many marketing panels over the last couple of years, and inevitably the first couple of questions and the first 15 minutes of a 30-minute panel is on all the stuff you can't do.
Yeah.
And we just need to stop wasting our time with the discussions on what we can't do and really instantly shift to what are those things that can be done, and how do we manipulate those to affect positively.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of like, move first, ask questions later kind of thing. But at the same time, if there are kind of rigid restrictions, which again, why don't we push up against them? What's to stop? Again, I think one of the cards you put together was like, open a dispensary in the Arctic. So, so you've got this little island in the Arctic, which is, disputed. It's owned by Canada and Denmark because it's part of Greenland officially. So they've had this kind of quiet little war for years where the sort of Canadians come in, take down the Danish flag, leave them a bottle of whiskey. And then a couple of months later, the Danish come along, take down the Canadian flag, leave them a bottle of aquavit. And this has been this kind of silent kind of, unspoken thing for decades. And they've recently come to a conclusion that, okay, right, we'll just draw a line down the middle and call, we'll have half each, which, is pretty obvious way of doing it because it's just a lump of ice in the Arctic. But again, the idea that we had was like, well, why not open a dispensary on the Canadian side? And reignite the tension and see what happens. But again, that as ridiculous that is, if someone did that as like a PR effort or something like that, it's like
it'd be a great pop-up.
Absolutely, right? It would be a great pop-up.
I get that would be, and certainly a lot of fun.
Yeah, but again, it's like, what can't we do? Well, let's push up literally against the literal borders of what we can and can't do, and figure out a way to challenge and provoke discussion. And I think the best marketing is always memorable. So it's the ad campaigns that I remember as a kid. That's actually I collate loads of them on like YouTube. I'm like, hey, I remember that ad. I wonder if it's there. Yes, right. Add to the list. Yeah. It's just things like that kind of stay with you and are memorable, and that I guess we now have an opportunity to get people involved and be involved with it, because I think again it's just that element of fun that prevails.
It is indeed our jobs to provoke discussion in each of these sectors, right? I think it's something that I've loved seeing from all of our various meetings around the globe in the last year, and our various common associations where we are trying hard to drive whatever the discussion is that needs to happen in whatever part of the world it needs to happen in at any given time. And as you indicated earlier, compare notes so people don't have to relive the same pains every time, but we can identify new pains and figure out how to conquer those.
Absolutely. And I think one thing I've sort of put out there is like, I'm never afraid to ask stupid questions, because there are experts out there, people who know stuff, but unless we ask those very it's like no one wants to be seen as like the idiot who doesn't know anything. But sometimes there's merit in actually just being, look, I know nothing about this, tell me what you think, tell me what your opinion is on this, because again I can draw conclusions based on other things. And I think that's again a healthy part of any sort of provocative or debate or discussion. 100%.
Well, and I think it's probably a great point to to settle on, which is, as people are listening to this and hopefully taking something from the conversation and questions are popping in, part of the platform that we both have is the opportunity to do that. So, it's early in the year and we're all still working on figuring out what is it we're going to be talking about in 2023. So, it's always good to take those kinds of questions from the audience. People can always reach me through the Global Cannabis Network Collective. And Dave, what's the best way for people to reach out to you and Thermidor and Lobster Pot?
I mean, we're all over the socials. So we're on LinkedIn. It's and our website is thermidor.wtf. And yeah, that is a real domain name. We didn't realize it was a thing, but yeah, absolutely. So it's Dave.Barton at thermidor.wtf. Always around. Or check out the website. We can or link into me. I'm a bit of a LinkedIn hoe bag, but because I just love it. It's I'm not fussy. I'll link into anyone, well, within reason. But you know what I'm saying. We're around. We're on Instagram as well. We're getting on the Instagram. We're trying to do more there as well, just because it's like, do you know what? It's a very visual platform, and we want to kind of showcase more stuff there. So,
Yeah.
So
well,
yeah,
and it's always entertaining and informative. So, I obviously want everybody to listen to the GCNC worldview and hear our folks, but also definitely encourage folks to hook in with the Lobster Pod as well, because part of the early iterations of this podcast when we did it, I always felt like we didn't have quite the breadth of geographical reach that I was looking for, and partnering up with you guys has really helped do that. We get the perspectives certainly on both sides of the Atlantic, and it gives us additional reach into other markets as well. So it's always a pleasure, Dave. Thanks so much for coming on.
No, thanks for having me on. And we'll speak soon for sure. And hi to everyone out there. And give me a call anytime. I won't give you my number, but email. You know where to come. But yeah, thank you so much, Chris. And
thanks all.
Speak soon.
We'll talk
Alrighty.
soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
All the best.